Today we're going to be continuing on our journey for arrays by learning about 2D arrays. So this is our lesson objectives for today. We will go through what are 2D arrays, which are basically very similar to 1D arrays. And then at the end of class, if there is time, which I'm not sure if there will be, I will demo, and then you guys can demo some of the things we learned in class today. And then you guys can, either pop your questions in the chat, or like there will be problems where you guys can answer and interact. Any questions? Let's move on. So what are 2D arrays? Well, to begin with, what we learned on Wednesday, the day before yesterday, was 1D arrays. And 1D array is a single list. 2D arrays, on the other hand, are multiple lists that consist of one or more arrays. So basically, 2D arrays are arrays within a greater array. Of course, it is still all variables of the same type. If you have an array of strings and then there's suddenly an integer in there, the computer will throw an error and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Of course, you can have as many or as few as you want. And declaring an array is a 2D array is very similar to declaring a 1D array. It's just that instead of one square bracket, you now have two because it's two-dimensional, right? And there are curly braces around each set of array and curly braces around each the whole array. 2D arrays are, you can think of them as like a chart. That's what I like to think of them as, because that's basically what it is. There are rows and columns in a 2D array, and each number has its own individual index that consists of now two numbers, because now there are rows and columns depending on where it is placed. So for example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it goes in a chart like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, and then here 5, 6, 7, 8. And there are rows and columns. Of course, this is column 1, 2, 3, 4. But indexes for arrays start with 0, so it's column 0, 1, 2, 3, and then this is row 0, row 1. When we access an array, the row comes first. The row comes first. And then the column comes second. I don't know how many of you have learned about graphs and X and Y axis, and I don't know if it would help you to think of it as like a graph where there's X and a Y axis. But basically, you can think of the rows as the X axis, the column as the Y axis, and you know how X axis always comes first when you refer to a point. It's similar like that. Row always comes first, and then it's the column. So for example, when I want to access the 7, I will type out system.out.println and my numbers, bracket 1, bracket 2. And then when I hit run, that would print out the number 7. It's very similar to how we would access a 1D array. All right. And one thing I missed yesterday was declaring and making sure the size of an array. So there are actually 3 ways to declare an array. And so the first way is just the data type and the name. Now this is the simplest way to declare an array, but it declares the array. It basically says, oh, there's this array of ints called int array. But because you didn't put anything in there, there's nothing in there, and it's basically null. It doesn't know how big or how small the array is, so it doesn't know how much to put in there or how little to put in there. So it's basically null. When you try to print, like int array 0, like with the square, try to access the first element in an array, the computer will throw an error because there is nothing in that array. You can't access anything that's in the array. Does that make sense? The fact that because there's nothing in there, it's null. Okay, very good. And we talked about no pointer yesterday, and this is basically the computer will throw a no pointer exception because there is nothing in the array. You can't print anything out. Okay, now we move on to the second way to declare an array, and that is to int array equals new int 20. So now this declares an array and the size of array. The 20 means that there will be 20 slots. Now, because you didn't say what goes into each slot, the slots are empty, but because you initialized that, so you basically told the computer, here, I have an array of ints, and I want this array of ints that's called int array, the name, you also initialize the name. I want this int array to be 20 slots big. Now, so the computer will be like, okay, I will make an int array with 20 empty slots. It's empty because you didn't put anything in there, but the computer knows now that this is 20. And because this is a data type, like the data type is an int, and int is a primitive, it will automatically set every single value in there to 0. Now, I think this depends on what version of Java you're using, but I think that's what it does on the newest version of Java. And of course, this depends on your IDE as well. Sometimes your IDE will be using an older version of Java, so there will be a lot of discrepancies on whether it initializes to 0 or initializes to null. But I think like 90% of the time, it will initialize to 0 because that's how ints work. There's a link that I am going to put in the chat right now. So this link is about multidimensional arrays in Java. Of course, since we have 1D array, 2D array, there's going to be 3D, 4D, etc., etc. But 3D and 4D arrays get really, really complicated, and we are not going to be talking about them in this class. For the purpose of this course, we will only be talking about 1D array and 2D arrays. That's as high up as we are going to go. This website talks about 3D and like higher dimensional arrays as well, but you can just ignore that. So number 3 is the last way to declare an array, correctly declare an array. Of course, there's infinite ways to incorrectly declare an array. And this is basically by saying, by actually putting the values in the curly braces. Now, when you actually put the values in the curly braces, you don't need to tell Java how many slots there are, because it will like automatically collect the information and be like, oh, there's 6 elements in this array. So you don't need to put anything in the square brackets anymore. And since you put something in the curly brackets, it's not going to be 0 anymore. So this one initializes everything. Of course, can you initialize in one of these ways and then set the array to something else? That's weird. And then set the array to something else? Of course you can. The link that I just put in the chat right now actually did it one of those ways. So this way. There was an example in here. So for example, this one declared it this way. It didn't actually initialize all the values at once. And then later on, it assigned a value to the elements. You can also do it like that. Basically, the point of this slide is that you can declare an array various different ways and then later assign values to the elements, to the slots in each array. Many different ways to do this. Okay. Now it's very similar to the arrays. You just add 2 square brackets, and when you add a new int, you have to declare the size of like both of those, both row and column. So you would need 2 square brackets and 2 values inside the square brackets. So basically this one right here, it would declare an array and the size of the array, and 20 comes first. Remember, row always comes first. So basically in this int array, there are 20 rows and 10 columns, which adds up to 200 elements. 20 times 10 equals 200, right? There's 200 elements in this array. Now, because we haven't initialized anything yet, all 200 slots are blank. It's all 0. There's basically an array of 200 zeros. And here, wait, typo, I forgot. Right, typo. Remember, 2D arrays will always need a 2 square brackets. If you did what I just did, where you only have 1 square bracket, the computer basically throws an error and it says there is a error in the data type. Like you have values that are defined as a 2D array, but your data type says is 1D array. And it will basically throw an error. I don't know what type of error it'll throw. I'll have to look that up, but know that it will definitely throw an error. And of course, don't forget to separate your arrays with commas and separate each element in the array with commas as well. Commas, commas, commas. Now there are some common uses for each array, finding the length. Now, because we are working with 2D arrays, there are 2 dimensions, the width and the height, and there are different commands that you use to find the width and the height. So, array name .length is for the number of rows. So, how many rows does the array have? And if you remember, row comes first. It's this value right here. The first value. If you do array name .length, it will give you this value. If we have, so what do we do when we want to find the number of columns? This one gives numbers of rows. This command gives the number of columns, and the number of columns is this number right here. And we do array name square bracket I, where I can be any number, where I can be any number, dot length. Remember, there's still no parentheses after the length. And then this will give you the number of columns. So, and the reason that this one has a square bracket and I, whereas this one doesn't, is because we are counting in here, we are counting the length of each row. And this is basically saying that this is row 0 or row 1 or row 2, whatever. And it's counting the length of each row. So array name and with the square bracket and I signifies it's a row. Array name .length signifies it's the entire array and counting the length of the entire array. Okay, example right here. My numbers 2 rows 4 columns. Because there are 2 rows, my number .length equals 2. My number 0 .length equals 4. For 2 rows 4 columns. Let's keep going. Now, printing elements of an array, of course, you can basically go through and access each array by like hand printing out everything. But when you have a very, very large array, like array with 200 elements, like the example earlier, a for loop is really going to come in handy because with a for loop, you can basically get it done in 3 lines. 5 lines if you include the brackets, but that's just how I like to format stuff. And because it's a 2-dimensional array, there are 2 dimensions. You would need 2 for loops or while loops, depends. It doesn't matter. I personally prefer for loops. You can also use while loops. They work the same. And it's going to be a nested for loop, which means a for loop inside a for loop, or like a loop inside a loop. And so here you can see I've initialized my array, and then I would be equal to the number of the row number, the row index, same thing. J would be equal to the number of columns or the column index, what column the number is in. And then it would print out the number that is in each of these. So for example, let's go through it one by one. Insert text box. And let me move this down a little. So in the first, when it begins, int I equals 0, I equals 0, J also equals 0. And when that, and that makes my number 0, 0, which equals 1. And then I doesn't change. Remember, I is still the same because we have to go in and finish the J loop first. So J plus plus. Wait, there's a typo again. J plus plus would make J1 now, and my number 0 and then 1 would make 2, because 2, if you guys remember, go back to the chart here, 0, 2, 0, 1 is 2, 0, 0 is 1, 0, 2 is 3, and that goes on like that. And we keep going until, let's do I equals 3, J equals 3, I equals 0, J equals 3. I'm gonna skip I equals 2 for the sake of time. My numbers 0, 3, and that equals 4. That corresponds to 4, if you guys remember. 0, 3, that corresponds to 4. Now, since if we keep going, J would equal to 4. Now, the length of each row is 4 because there are 4 columns, right? If J equals to 4, 4 is not smaller than my numbers I dot length, because my numbers I dot length is equal to 4. So 4 is not equal to my numbers dot length, so it exits out of this for loop. But when this exits out of this for loop, we still have this for loop that we haven't finished. We need to finish the first for loop before we can leave the entire for loop. So basically what that happens is I now plus plus, I plus plus, which equals to 1. So I is 1, I is now 1. And when I is 1, and then we enter this for loop again. When I is 1, we enter this for loop again, and we go through everything that we just went through. J equals 0, J equals 1, and then so that prints out 1, 2, that prints out 5, 6, 7, 8. I know this is a little bit messy, but we probably have time to demo it in whatever ID you're using later on. Let's move on to the next slide. So how do we set a 2D array equal to another? This is what we talked about last time. We're setting a reference point to another, and now 2D arrays work the same way as 1D array does. They are both information, data that is stored in these boxes. You know, you can think of them as little boxes that's stored in the back of the computer, and each belongs in a different box because they're different arrays. If we set array 2 to equal to array 1, the same thing happens as we learned on Wednesday. Array 2 now goes to the box of array 1. And if array 2 changes, array 1 also changes, and vice versa. If array 1 changes, array 2 also changes. So now these two are basically the same array. They just go by different names, but they're basically the same. And that's most of the time, unless that's what you're actually going for, most of the time that's not what most programmers are trying to do. Most programmers are trying to basically find 2 arrays that are like the same, and then change one of them, and then compare and do that stuff. This would technically be considered a quote-unquote mistake. So this is not what most programmers are trying to do. What most programmers are like consider the correct way would be using a for loop or while loop, and this is very similar to what we did earlier. Basically, we are setting the array 2 to equal to whatever array 1 is equal to. It's the same nested for loop. It's the same it's the same idea behind this and this, because we are going through the array, we are accessing each element, just that in the previous example, we are printing out the element, and in this example, we are setting the element of array 2 to the corresponding element in array 1. Here are the demo activities I planned for today. We're not going to have any individual activities today because arrays are a difficult topic. I will be walking you through all of these activities. Of course, if you want to challenge yourself and you want to do it individually, that is totally okay. You can do it individually while I do it, and then you can compare your answer to mine. Of course, you don't have to share your answer with the class if you don't want to, but if you do want to, it would be very welcome if you can share your answers with the class and we can discuss the different ways to solve each problem. And these are the demo activities, and that's the order I plan on doing it. However, if you have a preference, or like if you want to see a certain activity, you can put your suggestions in the chat. So as you guys can see here, I have created 2 array list of integers, and they are random. You can make your own, you can copy mine, that doesn't really matter, it's just random numbers. The first demo activity will be accessing certain elements. To comment this out. Right. We'll be accessing certain elements. So for example, if I want to print the 10 in my num, so I would be my num on 0 and 1. If I want to print the -52 in my num, it would be my num 2. Had to think for a while. 2 and then 2, yes. And the reason for that is everything starts at 0. So this is row 0, row 1, row 2, row 2, 0, row 2, 1, and row 2, 3. So, no, row 2, 0, row 2, 1, row 2, 2. Yeah, so row 2, 2. So this is index of 2, 2. And then what is the last number that you guys want to print out? Pick a random number that's in the my num array list, and I will demonstrate the corresponding index. Can someone pick a random number in the my num array? Okay, 7. Where is 7? 7's in the count array, but that's okay, I guess. Count, which 7? I'm assuming the first 7. Okay, well, if this first 7, that's row 0. Row 0 and index 2. So let's run this. 10, -52, and 7. Very good. That's how you print out a element in an array. Now, what if we want to change an element in an array? If we want to change an element, let's say I want to change my num to 44. All right. It's just that easy. We tell which array we want to take it from. This is the name of the array, my num. So I first say this is the array called my num, and the index of the number that I want to change is 0, 1. So 10, and I want to change this number to 44. Now when we print, it turns into 44 -52, 7. And that's how you change and access a number from an array. Any questions about this? No? Okay. Now let's talk about how to initialize an 2D array using a for loop. I will be demonstrating for loop. Does anybody want to see a demo using while loop? Okay, so nobody put anything in the chat. I'm assuming all of you want to see a demo using for loop. Okay, so let's, what should I name this? This is the hardest thing when I'm coding, is like creating accurate names. Let's just do demo. No, I cannot name it that. All right, I mean, you know what? I can name it smile. New and how big should I be? Like, let's just make it 3. 3 rows, 3 columns. Okay. And I will make this array from 0 to 8. Because there are 9 slots in this array. 3 times 4 equals 9, right? 9 slots in this array. And if I start from 0, I will only have like enough space to go until 8. To do that, let's do int. No, we have a count. Addition. Let's do addition. It's 0 because I want to start from 0. And let me comment log this out because it's getting annoying. And if we want to do a for loop, int I equals 0, I is smaller than smile.length. Remember, we are using a nested for loop, and with a nested for loop, to do anything with an array, the outer for loop is always going to be the row because the row comes first. The inner for loop is always going to be the column because the column comes second. So smile.length, it refers to the length of to how many rows there are. There are 3 rows. So I start from 0 is smaller than 3. So the maximum it can go to is 2. And because 2 is the maximum index there is for the row, that's exactly what we want. And then I for int. Now we already used I up there. We're going to do a new integer, and I named it int j. It's usually ijk. Sometimes it's l. K is not k. J is smaller than smile. Your lot line usually is 0 because it's the first row. We don't want to do like smile 5 and have it throw an array out of bounds exception because there is no smile 5. There's only 3 rows. The maximum it goes to is smile 2. So almost all the time it's just 0 when we talk about the length of and row, the length of a row, which equals the number of columns. And then j like the usual. But if we want to initialize it, we start from the first one. The first one would be smile I j equals count. And wait, not count. Addition. Right. Because count is all right. And then because it's increasing 1 by 1, we can do count addition plus plus. And then let's just print it out to make sure that we actually have what we want. You know what? I'm gonna just copy this over. Okay, did I have everything else commented? Good. And now let's run it. See if it, okay, yes, very good. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now if we change this to 1, it's now going to be from 1 to 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. See, very exact. Okay. What if we wanted to be 0 to 18? Plus equals 2. Do you guys remember plus equals 2? Let's start from 0 again. This way it will go up until 18. No, 16. Oh, 16 because it starts from 0. If we start from 2, it'll go up to 18. See? So that's how you basically initialize an array using a for loop. Now, this is usually when you need to initialize using, like, there's a pattern between the in the array. If it's just random numbers, you can, of course, just make it. If you want to initialize array full of random numbers, we can make it of math.random. Random. Remember, this is. Let's make it from 0 to 11, 0 to 10, because it's not inclusive of the last one. So it's basically going to be from 0 to 10. Math.random. Oh wait, yes. Math.random is automatically double, so you have to cast it to int. And I like to, you don't have to, but I like to put parentheses around this just to make everything formatting a lot more clear. Now this is gonna give us a bunch of random numbers between 0 and 10. Okay. If we do it again, different set of random numbers, do it again, different set of random numbers. That's how you initialize an array using a for loop. Now, if we want negative numbers, of course, just make the range. Let's make the range a little bit bigger, 50. So it's going to be from -20 to -20 to like 30. Yeah, see, that's how you basically make random array full of random numbers. Any questions on this? No. Okay. Okay. Let's comment. No, let's comment. Let's comment all this out and move on to the next activity. Do you guys remember what the next activity is? You probably don't. I also don't. I have my notes over here. The next activity is count all of the number, count the number of sevens in an array. And we are going to count the number of sevens in this array called count. So of course, to go through an array, we need a for loop. So for int I equals 0, same thing. Count dot length I plus plus equals 0, j smaller than count. Right. And number of sevens equals 0. It starts out from 0, right? So if count I j equals to 7, number 7 increases. And if we run this, oh wait, I forgot to print out. I'm stupid. Wait, is it here? Outside of this, system that out print line 7. Don't forget the semicolon. And when this finishes, we can see how many number 3. There's 3 number 7s in this. Let's count 1, 2, 3. See, that's correct. That's how you count. If there are how many numbers of a certain number there are in an array. Of course, we can change the number of 7s. Now this will give us 4. We can also change the number to 60. So for example, how many 60s are there in this array? There's only 1. How many 100s are there in this array? There's 0. Okay, So that's basically how you count the number of a certain number in an array. And any questions on that? No? Okay. Anything like interesting that you guys want to do with an array? I am basically demonstrating like all the different things you can do with the array, but if you want to see something else that I haven't thought of so far, you can also tell me. All right, the next activity on the list is printing the sum of the second row. Okay, so let's do it. Of course, we are printing the sum. The direction says to print the sum of the second row. So that means there's only be one row involved in this. So we don't need like 2 for loops. We only need 1 for loop. Let's still make it j equals 0, j smaller than, let's do count dot length. Now let's make it int total. That's equal to 0 to begin with. And then total plus equals count. We are doing the second row, and remember second row has index of 1, j. Now the second row is 7, 20, 30, 7. Who can tell me what that adds up to? The second row of count. Who can tell me what this adds up to? Put your answers in the chat. Who can tell me what these 4 numbers add up to? What is 7 plus 20 plus 30 plus 7? What does it equal? Okay, 64, very good. That is the correct answer. And let's see if the computer can get the correct answer as well. I forgot to print this out. All right. Wow, total typo. Yes, it's 64. That's how you print the sum of the second line. What if I don't want to print the sum of the second line? What if I want to print the sum of the third line? Well, I just change the index from from 1 to 2, and since the index of 2 refers to this line, which is the third line, it now gives me the sum of the third line. Does that make sense? Does anybody want to see how to print the sum of a column? Does anybody want to see how to print the sum of a column?
Yes.
Now, comparatively, printing the sum of a column is a little bit trickier than printing the sum of a row, but no problem. Let's do this. Now, remember, let's do the second column. And now, because this column is now the row number that changes, the column number doesn't change, and we're printing out the second column. So it's gonna be an index of 1, and now it's the row number that's going to be changing, and because it's the row number that's going to be changing, we are now doing the limit to the number of rows instead of the limit to the number of columns. So instead of this row, we are printing out this column. second column, which is 20 plus 9, which equals 49, and the computer got that correct. What if we want to print the third column? We just change a single number, and it's now 44, right? 7 plus 30 plus 7, that's 44. We want to do the fourth column. $67. 0 plus 7 plus 60, that's 67. So it's relatively easy to print the sum of a row or a column as long as they are in the same row or column. It gets a little bit more trickier when you're trying to print diagonally. Does anybody want to see how to print the sum of something diagonal?
No. Is it with
and nobody said anything in the chat? I'm assuming you guys don't want to see how to print the sum of diagonals. So let's move on to the last activity, how to find the largest or smallest number in an array, in a 2D array. Now, yesterday, we demonstrated how to find the smallest and largest number in a 1D array, and that is basically using a for loop and checking if it's larger or smaller. It's the same idea here. Now, this is probably the hardest activity out of all that we have done today, but it's the same methodology. It's the same method. It's the same idea as what we've done yesterday. So okay, it's the same methodology as what we've done yesterday. Now I'm going to use my num as the example that we use here. So we have to set an int max that's equal to my num. That's the first number in my num. And then int min, that's also equals the first number of my num. I'm gonna just set it to max. I don't want to type out my num 0 twice. For int I equals 0, I is smaller than my num dot length, I plus plus. For int j is equal to 0, j is smaller than my num 0 dot length, because it is the number of columns, and then j plus plus. Okay, and now we are going to find the max and the min, and to do that we do the same thing as yesterday. If my num I j is greater than max, then max equals my num ij. And then let's also find the min if this number is smaller than a minimum, min now equals to this number. And see if you can type in the chat, what is the largest number in my num and what is the smallest number in my num? Type it in the chat. I will give it, let's give it 1 minute. Let's go until 55. Very good, Ethan. It is smallest is negative 578. Yes, that is the smallest number. Did I say 55? I meant let's go till 56. Can you guys find the largest number in here in my num? $329. Yes, exactly. 329. Yes. Yes, I'm making sure I type these numbers out like randomly, so I actually don't know what is the largest or what is smallest, and let's have to go through. Okay, so yes, the largest is 329 and the smallest is negative 578. And I almost forgot to print it out again. So system.out, the print line max. And if we run this should print out negative 329 and a negative 578. That is correct. So that is basically how you find the max and min in a 2D array, very similar to what we did yesterday, right? How we did it using a 1D array. Because when you try to find the max and the min of any array, whether it be 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, you go through the easiest way, like the simplest way, is just to go through and then check if each number is greater or smaller than the min and or the max. That's basically it. I will paste the activities into the chat. I will also paste my code into the chat. So one will be accessing certain elements. This will be accessing certain elements and then changing. Oops. I will just paste my code into the chat for anybody that wants to use it. Oops. It's not formatted correctly, but that's okay. Formatting doesn't matter that much anyway, right? And then initialize using a for loop. To initialize using a for loop is like this. That's how you initialize using a for loop, right? And then number 3 is count the number of 7s in an array. Now it doesn't have to be number 7. It can be the number of like any other number. But I just set it to 7 because 7 is a lucky number. And then that's how you count the number of 7s in an array. Here is how you print the sum of the second row, but it doesn't have to be the second row. Okay, this is actually printing the sum of the column. This is for the print sum of fourth column. Just have to print the sum of the fourth column. If we want to like print the sum of second row, we change the J and wait. Second row, first index, second row, no, yes, second row has an index of 1. Indexes are very confusing. Can I edit this? I have a typo. That's okay. And then finally 5, finding the smallest and the largest number. Since I use my num as an example, I'll also include that in the okay, these are all demo that I've done. You can of course modify it and do your own different demo, but class is officially over now. If you guys have any other questions, you can stay and Jim and I will be happy to help you with your questions. But if you don't have questions, you guys are free to go. You guys are dismissed from class now. Bye.